Hello everybody, my name is Otis Bradley. Welcome to o2ale.com. My little nano brewery operation. Today we're going to be talking about basic brewing. Anybody who's interested in getting out there and making your own high quality beer, it's really easy to do. About as easy as baking bread, and we're going to show you how to do it today. Okay, so in today's video I'm going to talk about basic home brewing, how to keep it simple and why that's a good idea for your first few rounds, the ingredients of beer, what goes into beer, the equipment that you'll need, we'll go through all that, and then we'll go through an actual brewing day. So let's get started here. Okay, who am I? As I mentioned, my name is Otis Bradley. I am no expert in brewing beer, but I've been brewing for about 3 years. I've probably brewed about 30 batches of extract and mini mash recipes. I'm rapidly becoming a beer geek, which you may become as well one day. I'm hoping by watching this video you may be able to save some of the mistakes I've made, some of the bad batches I've made. It's really pretty simple, but it helps to have a little advice. So let me know what you think. Okay, basic brewing. We got 4 ingredients: barley, hops, yeast, and water. Or as Jackie Moon would say, barley, hops, and delicious alcohol. Hops here, you can see some fresh cone hops, some barley over here. Barley itself is a grain like wheat, except it's barley. This is what it looks like. When we get barley or malted barley for a home brewing kit, what they do is they take barley and they actually, to malt it, they actually get it to sprout or they get it to start growing, and then they stop it, and then it is roasted to different temperatures. And the really dark, it's kind of like coffee, dark roasts versus light roasts. The really dark roasts would make beer like Guinness, stout beers, and the light kind of grains would be pale ales. Hops, this is the way hop grows on vines, and these little hop cones. Hops have an ability to preserve beer, but the reason we use hops are really 2 important reasons. One, to create a bitterness in the beer. Beer without hops would be sickly sweet. So we put hops into the boil in the beginning of the beer to create bitterness, and then we also add them at the end of the boil for aroma. These are hop pellets. At first I kind of thought these were kind of a secondary product, but they're really not. They're a great product. The fresh hops will spoil quicker than these. These are condensed. They grind them up and they compress them into these pellets, so they travel better. They're more packageable than whole hops. You'll probably use both. Okay, yeast. For home brewers, we're going to have pretty much these 3 different kind of yeasts. The first one here is dry yeast, and if you've ever made bread before, inside this package is literally dry, powdery yeast. It's best to rehydrate this yeast, but for my first batch I didn't. I simply poured this right into the carboy. These are what are called smack packs from this company Y Yeast, a big yeast provider. There's a little thing inside here of yeast nutrients, and you literally put this between the palm of your hands and you smack it, and the thing will expand as the yeast starts to get activated. Or the third choice, the one that I mostly use, is from White Labs, this company here, and they have these cool tubes of liquid yeast. You want to make sure you take this out well in advance, maybe even the night before, out of the fridge so that it gets up to room temperature. But they have all different types of yeasts, and different yeasts work with different recipes. And the final of the big 4 is water. And water is a huge science all to itself. You've got things like hardness, all different kinds of chemicals that are in your water. But basically, for your first few batches, if you have good water, I have a whole house water filtration system at my house, so my water is clean. You definitely don't want water that's got chlorine in it. That's going to ruin your beer. So if you don't have water that tastes pretty good, go get some purified water, not distilled water, purified water. Actually, I'm going to suggest that you get a 2.5 gallon container of purified water if you are using your own water in addition. If you're not, you may want a couple of 5-gallon jugs. Okay, you're also going to want a 20-pound bag of ice, but we'll get back to that. Equipment. Alright, there's a lot of ways you can go. There are some very inexpensive ways you can start off, couple hundred bucks, but I'm going to suggest that you spend about $500 for basic setup. If you're brewing beer to save money, as I say, forget about it. It ain't going to happen. You know, this hobby, you quickly will get addicted and spend lots of money, and it's easy to spend $2-3 grand as you get up into all grain systems. But for your initial system, here's a basic price list. You need a pot, 4 to 5 gallon pot. I like the glass carboys. You can also ferment in a plastic bucket. You're going to need a siphon and some tubing. Bucket, as we said, a good thermometer. You're going to need some sanitizer. Here's a big expense, and one that I suggest you do. Get a keg. Get a 5-gallon. They're called corny kegs. We'll talk about that more. But otherwise, you've got a bottle, and bottling is a big hassle. You got to wash up 50 different bottles, sanitize 50 different bottles. With a keg, it's a one-stop thing. But the problem is, you got to also have a refrigerator. We'll get into that. A hydrometer. I wouldn't bother with these. I got one. I never used it. It's kind of a hassle. A refractometer would be a more advanced way. This measures the gravity or helps you measure the alcohol in your beer. You really don't need either at this point. You'll need an airlock and stopper, good book, some brushes, strainers, funnels, etc. So about $500. I'm going to give you some resources for some really good online websites where you can order all this stuff. But the first thing you want is a stainless steel pot. As I said, 4 to 5 gallons is good. You want to make sure you got a good top. A glass carboy. I like a 6.5 gallon carboy. Your beer is going to come up to here, but that'll give you some head space. So if you get a beer with a lot of kreuzen, it gives you some room. You want a plastic funnel. As I said, some people will ferment beer right in a plastic bucket. They have tops, and you can put your fermenter or your airlock right on the top here. The problem with plastic buckets is when you clean them, if you use any kind of a brush or a plastic pad or something like that, you're going to score the inside of this thing, and it's going to create a vessel that has lots of places for bacteria to harbor, and eventually, or pretty quickly, it's not going to be very good. I choose glass. This is a hydrometer, which I said don't bother with, so I wouldn't bother with it. This is a refractometer, which is about a $60 investment. You really don't need this either, but eventually this is going to help you find out what your wort gravity is, basically the amount of sugar. You're going to measure it before you ferment it and then after you ferment it, so that you can tell how much alcohol and how well your yeast has attenuated. But that's advanced stuff. You don't need to bother with that now. A thermometer. You need one of these. I like these ones here that have the little clip that clip onto the side of the pot and this long stain. It's an analog or a dial on the side here. You need a racking cane. This one comes from morebeer.com, and I'm going to give you that name again. This little thing here lets you blow into, this is an air filter, it lets you blow in here to create your siphon. So rather than creating siphons other ways, a second choice would be I think they call them automatic siphons. It's basically a two-piece thing, and you push it and it fills your siphon and gets your beer going. More about that later. Stainless steel spoon, a good strainer, an airlock. This is what I think is the typical one. This is one that's got a kind of a crazier design, but they both work equally as well. And as I said, either you're going to have 50 bottles or so from your batch that you're going to have to clean, sanitize. You're going to have to put your beer in here along with some fermenting sugar to get it to ferment in the bottle. Then you're going to have to cap it and store it. It's a big hassle. What you really want to get is a keg system. This is going to cost you about $185, more or less. This is called a corny keg or a Cornelius keg. named after the people that made these. These were used widely for the soda companies, Pepsi and Coke. What they would do is they would distribute their soda in these things. That doesn't happen any longer. They now use cardboard boxes with a little plastic bag in there. So these things have been available at very good prices, but apparently they're running out now. So they're getting harder and harder to find, but you can actually buy a brand new one as well if you can't find a used one. This is a CO2 tank. I think this is called a 5-pound tank. You need a tank, a regulator, and then that's going to have a hose that's going to go into the gas in. This is your beer out with a simple handle like this. It's really, really easy and definitely a huge time saver. You just have to clean this keg one time. You put all your beer in here, but you're going to have a refrigerator or some place to put this if you want your beer refrigerated. And I took the one in our garage, drilled a couple of holes in it. My wife saw it, freaked out for a little while, but she's gotten over it, and I've got good beer. Okay, brewing kits. There's really 3 ways you're going to go. One is an extract, or sometimes called beer in a box. It's a very simple way to make beer. You can make good beer this way. The second, slightly more advanced, and definitely you can start off this way, is called a mini mash. That's going to have some specialty grains that you will steep as well as extract. And this one here is actually liquid extract, you can see in this bag, versus powdered extract. And the third, and sort of way you want to eventually head, is called all grain brewing. And that's where you literally take all grain, you don't have any liquid extract, and you soak this in hot water to create your own wort rather than using it from an extract. You have a lot more control this way, and it's really, if you want to get creative and you want to stick with brewing, that's where you want to go eventually. You're going to need some sanitizer. There's really 2 kinds that I know of, the iodine based, which is what this is, or Star San, and you can get those from any brewing supply place. But this liquid, what you want to do is you want to clean all your brewing equipment physically first with hot water, non-perfumed soap, and then you want to sanitize it. So cleaning it removes all the soils and gooky stuff. Sanitizing kills all the bacteria. Brew day. I'm going to take you through a recent brew day, and I've broken it down into 10 simple steps here. First thing you want to do is you want to organize your kitchen, organize your materials and your equipment. Then you're going to start to steep your specialty grains if you're doing a mini mash. Then you're going to get into your boil. Once you have your boil going, you're going to start adding your hops. You're going to boil everything for about 60 minutes. After that's done, you're going to take your pot, you're going to stick it in the sink filled with ice. You're going to chill down the temperature from boiling, which is 212 degrees, to about 100 degrees or less. Then you're going to transfer this all to the carboy. You're going to add water if you're doing a partial boil, which is what we're showing you here. So you're going to add that purified water, so you have a total of 5.5 gallons of wort. Once you add your yeast, then you've actually got beer. So then after you've added your yeast, you're going to ferment that for a week, 7 to 14 days. After that, you're going to transfer it into the keg. It'll take a couple days to carbonate, and then you're ready to enjoy your beer. So the whole process usually takes me about 3 hours to brew up beer. Pretty simple. Then you've got anywhere from 7 to 14 days to ferment. Then you're going to transfer it to your keg or bottle if you're a nut. Once it's kegged, it takes a couple days to carbonate typically, but it really takes another week or 2 before the beer starts getting good, depending on the type of beer. Sometimes a month or more for it to kind of really mellow. And then pretty much by the time that beer's all gone, it seems to be peaking, and it's time to brew another batch. By the way, this is a 5-gallon recipe, which is somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 beers, maybe 48 12-ounce beers. So a typical kit will cost you anywhere from 30 to 60 bucks. You can do the math on that, how much it costs. And this is the kit that we're going to brew today. Very simple. I've got a little video here that explains it. Okay, what I've got here is my kit from More Beer. This one is called American Wheat. It's actually for a friend of mine's wedding. We're going to call it White Wedding Ale. But you can see this is very simple. I've purchased this liquid yeast. I like this kind of yeast. This is California Ale yeast. It comes from White Labs. They have these cool tubes, and they have liquid yeast compared to the dry yeast or the snack packs. We have two types of dried extract. That's dried like a powder versus the liquid extract. This particular one is called DME, dried malt extract. It's a light extract. And this one in back here, this is actually a Bavarian wheat malt extract. So again, this is going to be a wheat beer. I've got only 2 hops. I've got an ounce of Cascade hops, and I've got an ounce of, or a half an ounce of Cascade hops that I'm going to use at the end of the boil. The ounce is going to go in the beginning. The ones at the end will be for aroma. And this is some of my equipment, as I mentioned. This book here by John Palmer, How to Brew. It's an excellent book. I suggest you get it. Not only does he give you the simple method, kind of doing what we're doing here, but after he tells you how to brew from a kit like this, then he breaks everything down and talks about how to brew all grain as well. I've got a measuring cup. There's my iodine sanitizer. Keep it in a cup because it'll stain stuff like counters. I got my stainless spoon and thermometer. I've got a small strainer and a large strainer. I've got a funnel to get the beer into the carboy. I've got my 5-gallon pot here. I've got about a 6-gallon bucket, food grade bucket, and then I've got my 6.5-gallon carboy, and this back here is a carboy brush. It's a long brush that you can reach in there to clean with. As I mentioned, I've got, in this case, this is a 3-gallon can of purified water, not distilled water, but purified water, and a 20-gallon bag of ice. We talked about yeast. I really like this kind of yeast. I've used all 3. My first batch was with dry yeast. Very simple. I've gotten into the habit of making yeast starters now. First, as I mentioned, I just simply put the dry yeast into my beer. The second time, I hydrated that dry yeast. Then I started using this liquid yeast out of these bottles from White Labs. Now I'm making starters. So I'm constantly upgrading the way I prepare my yeast for pitching. Okay, so I got a 4-gallon pot here. You can see I have this handy dandy pot filler. I'm going to fill it about 3/4 of the way. And I use just the water right out of the tap because I have a whole house filtration system on here. The whole science to water. And basically you want to make sure you don't have chlorinated water. So you might need to get bottled water, or you might need to aerate your water so that you don't have that chlorine taste. Okay, the mini mash method. Simply one step more than the all extract, but you might have a second pot here. Basically, I'll fill this pot up about halfway. I'll heat it up to 170 degrees. Then I'll simply pour my specialty grains right in there. You don't want to heat it up more than 170 degrees because that's going to do different things to your grain. So heat it up to 170, pour your grains in there. Then what you're going to do after that steeps for about 20-30 minutes, you're simply going to pour this pot right through the strainer into this pot. Some guys will use bags. They'll put their grain in a bag. This is the method I learned. I simply pour it in here. I'll take my measuring cup and I will scoop some water out of there and sprinkle it back over the top of this grain into this brewing kettle. After I've done that, I will fill this brewing kettle up almost to the top here, and I'll turn it on and heat it up to about 170-180 degrees before I pour in my liquid extract. Check that what you want to do is you want to do it maybe 3/4 of the way. You want to leave some space in there because you're going to pour your extract. Depending on how much extract, that's going to fill up the pot. Now you want to turn off your burner while you're pouring your extract in. You want to stir this up. We're not too worried about sanitation until after the boil, so you don't have to be too paranoid about it, like I was when I did my first brew. Because after the boil, that's when you really need to be careful about sanitizing. So if you have powdered extract instead of liquid extract, you're simply pouring the powdered extract in there. Then once that's in and you've stirred it all in, it's dissolved into the water, you want to heat up your boil kettle until it starts to boil. You'll start to get, as it starts to boil, you'll start to see the water start to move, and you'll get this foamy. I think these are proteins. I usually scoop these off and throw it into this can here. But basically, you'll get a good boil going, and then you want to start your clock. Usually you have 60 minutes for a boil, and you're going to start making your first hop addition. But be careful, as soon as you pour the hops in there, the pot is going to want to boil over. So you need to be quick with your other hand to turn down the gas or turn down your stove, unless you want a huge mess. Okay, so you have hop additions. You can see this thing is really boiling now. As soon as I drop this hop in, these hops in, I'm not quite sure why it happens, but the whole thing starts to go whoop, up to the lid there, and it'll go up to the lid there, and it'll boil right over if you're not careful. So once the hops get in there, stir them in a little bit. Make sure the hops start to mix in before you raise your temperature back up and make your boil go. Now you're just going to follow your directions. If you may have one hop addition for 60 minutes and then one hop addition at the end for 5 minutes, or whatever the instructions say on your recipe. Alright, so once that thing gets boiling and I'm pretty comfortable that it's not going to boil over, I start to clean and sanitize my buckets. I use both a plastic bucket and a glass carboy. And I'll show you why. Okay, so after your boil is done, you're going to chill the wort. Now what I do is I fill my sink up with water. I put my 20 pounds of ice in there, which dissolves pretty quickly. And then I started putting in my freezer all these check. I started creating my ice blocks by simply taking some old plastic bottles and filling them with water to create ice blocks. So because I was using a ton of ice to chill down. So you want to chill this down as fast as possible. And by doing this ice bath, you're going to put your 20 pounds of ice in here. You're going to stick these bottles or whatever you can to keep it cool. You're going to stir this water around a bit. You want to make sure you don't get any water into the lid or into your beer. You want to keep this closed. You can, if you put your hand towards the top, be real careful because at 200 degrees it'll scald you. But as it starts to mellow out, you'll be able to feel this. And eventually I'll open this up a crack and I will stick my sanitized thermometer in there and I'll take a reading. I'll probably do that a couple times. Once it is cooled down, what we are going to do is we're going to take that wort from the pot that has chilled down in the ice bath, and I usually pour it through this strainer which has been sanitized. You can see this is the sanitizing liquid that's in here. This will all be dumped out before I pour my wort in there. But you want to, I usually pour my wort through this strainer because it helps me get a lot of the hops out, particularly if I've been using whole hops. I pour it all into the bucket, and then I will add the balance of 5 gallons of my purified water. Now you can see I've got a black magic marker line. You can see it around the back because the first couple times I did this, I didn't know how much water to add to create 5 gallons. So now I bring wherever my wort comes out to, I will add the balance from that purified water until I get 5.5 gallons, and then I will transfer it from the bucket through the funnel into my glass carboy. And then assuming the temperature of this wort in the carboy is at about my pitching temperature, which is anywhere from 65 to 75 depending on your yeast. You just need to check your directions on that too. You will pour the yeast right on in there, and then you'll put your airlock on, and you're done. So I've transferred my wort from the chilled pot into the bucket. I've added my water up to that 5-gallon line up there. Then I've transferred that into my 6.5-gallon carboy. As you can see, there's a lot of headspace here. Even so, one of my brews overflowed because it was such a vigorous fermentation. I have one of those temperature strips. You can see I put it up there. That's the wrong place to put it. You want to add it down there where it's going to tell your temperature of your beer. Okay, so there it is. All you got to do now is wait for 7 to 14 days. Actually, aerate and inoculate. So what you want to do, and this is pretty much done the way I described it. When I've added the water, I add the water through the strainer so it gets a lot of air into it. A lot of people will say that you want to shake this carboy around, make sure you get air in there before you put your yeast in there, because the yeast needs oxygen. Okay, look at this. This is the day after we brewed this beer. You can see it's got a really nice kreuzen. And look at all that activity. We need a nice yeast starter for this one. Really got it going well. This is just 8 o'clock. I pitched the yeast yesterday about 3, 4 o'clock. This is an organic IPA. Okay, so we talked about organizing your kitchen, cleaning up your kitchen, making sure everything is ready. Get your ingredients out, laid out. Get your instructions figured out. You're going to want to steep your specialty grains. Then you're going to want to create your boil, add your hops. After an hour, you're going to take that boiling pot and you're going to put it in your ice bath to chill it down. After it's chilled down to about 100 degrees or so, you're going to transfer it into your carboy, or in my case, I transfer it into the bucket first. I add the water up to 5 gallons. Then I transfer it all into my carboy, add my yeast, making sure that the temperature is good first. Then we're popping the airlock on and we're putting the wort in a place with it. And this is important. You need to put your wort in a place where the temperature is going to stay fairly stable. I use my garage, a closet. If you have a big swing in temperature, it's going to affect your beer. So you want that temperature to be between 65 and 75 for an ale. After a couple weeks of fermentation, you're going to transfer that beer from your carboy into the keg. You're going to use that transfer rod and you're going to put it in your keg. You're going to carbonate it. After a couple days, it's ready to go. And then after a month or so, it's going to be even better. There you can see it's the boil. I've just added some hops. Here's a beer that this was an imperial stout. And as far as recipes go, on your first one, start with a basic recipe. Don't go crazy. Don't get some double imperial vanilla hazelnut stout or something like that. This is an imperial stout, and I had some older yeast, so I doubled up on my yeast, and it just exploded. It just made a mess, and the beer wasn't very good. So do a couple recipes with a pale ale, even a basic IPA, something like that, just to get your feet wet. All right, so cleanliness is huge with making beer. You got to clean, you got to sanitize. It's very important. Fermenting temperatures are also important. If you stick your beer in a place and the temperature goes from 65 or 70 up to 80 or 90, that's going to stop your yeast from fermenting, and it's going to definitely affect the flavor of your beer. As I said, don't get too fancy on the first one. Get a simple recipe. Try it out a couple times. My first beer, I put it in the fermenter, and I didn't even see it ferment. I called the guy who sold me the thing. I said, I think I messed up. He said, don't worry about it. Just, go with it, put it in the keg, try it out. And it was fine. It was actually pretty darn good. So don't worry, be happy. These are some websites you should check out. Morebeer.com. They are the guys who make the beer sculptures, these incredible stainless steel beer sculptures. I'll show you one. They've got all kinds of brewing kits, all kinds of equipment. Northern Brewer is another one. I get a lot of stuff from this place up in Santa Cruz, California, Brew Organic. They've got organic beer kits, and they also sell equipment and stuff. Austin Homebrew is another really good website that sells beer stuff. Homebrew Talk is a forum where you can get lots of information. And you've got to check out Justin and the dudes at thebrewingnetwork.com. These guys have a huge number of podcasts you can download on your iPod, or you can listen to their website as well. There's a ton of information there I've listened to a lot of over the years, from beginner information to super sophisticated stuff. So check out those websites. What's next? Well, if you get into this, you're going to want to start improving your brewing system. The first thing you want to do is get a better pot. Instead of brewing in a 4-gallon or 5-gallon pot, you really need about an 8-gallon pot to brew your entire 5 gallons at one time. That's going to kind of trigger you getting some other stuff. But before you go all grain, you want to get a better pot. The next thing you want to do is you want to get temperature control for your fermentation, and that usually means getting an old ice box or something where you can control the temperature to keep your fermentation, if it's an ale, probably between 65 and 70 degrees. And then if you're really hooked, you're going to eventually get into all grain. And you're going to want a more sophisticated brewing system or a brew stand. You'll see this company, Blickman, all the big sellers of brew equipment sell Blickman pots. They have some really fantastic pots and some great brewing equipment. This is a refrigerator that's been converted to a fermentation temperature control. Basically, you add you plug your refrigerator into this thing, and it's got a sensor. When it reaches a certain temperature, it'll shut on and shut off. It's a simple way to do this. You can see this guy's got 3 carboys in here fermenting. Then you're going to get, if you start doing all grain, you're going to start doing, they call these brew stands or brew sculptures. This one here actually uses kegs. You can see these kegs are 15.5 gallons. A brewing system like this will have a hot liquor vessel where you're going to be heating up your water. You're going to have a mash tun. So this is going to have 12 or 20 pounds of grain, depending on the size of the batch you're doing, that you're going to be soaking with hot water in here. And then that's going to go into your boil vessel. I'm just starting to get into this, just looking to get into a bigger brewing system because I want to go all grain. This is one from More Beer. This is called a brew sculpture. This is called a tippy dump. As you get these systems, you need a pump. This is one pump and uses a pump and gravity. So you can see it's going to go from the mash tun, which is up here. The hot liquor tank is down here, so there's a pump that'll pump that water up here, and then by gravity it'll go down into your boil kettle. This one here also has a chute, so you can literally, they call it the tippy dump. It's on gimbals here, and you simply tip this over so all your spent grain will go into a garbage pail. This is a Brutus 10, or a knockoff of what's called a Brutus 10, which is a real nice, simple steel horizontal system. You got your 3 pots. You can have 1 or 2 pumps. There's a variety of different ways, but it's a real nice system. And here's Blickman's brewing stand. They have a bunch of different ways. A lot of guys will start doing all grain by using a cooler, a plastic. Again, this is plastic, so not as good as stainless steel. The Blickman system gives you a variety of different ways you can set this up. Pretty cool system. So that is how to homebrew. I hope you find this useful. We'd love to know how your first batch came out. Give us an email here or comment on the blog. Let us know what you think. If you signed up, or if you haven't signed up, please sign up. I may send you occasional videos like this of my tourist visits when I drag my family on vacation to various craft breweries. I might send you some occasional ramblings on some stuff that we've learned. Probably not very often, but I won't spam you and I won't send your email out to anybody else. I hope you've enjoyed this. And if you're into beer, you probably know what that is. So cheers. Good luck in your home brewing adventures. Keep us posted. Thanks very much.